Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. The Americans are going to the poll today. Whoever they elect will be the 47th president of the United States of America. They are going there to the elections confident of two things. Number one, that the elections will be free, fair, and credible. And whoever emerges will be the man elected by the majority of the people. The democratic wish of the American people. This assurance has got 250, nearly 250-year guarantee. Ever since that country's independence, ever since the election of the first president, George Washington, the Americans have consistently held free, fair, and credible elections. And the other guarantee is that if they are not happy with whoever it is, it could be Pamela Harris or it could be Donald Trump, they know that in 4 years' time, they can go back to the polls and elect somebody else. Those are two key guarantees that they have. Zimbabwe, we have had our independence for the last 44 years now, since 1980. We have yet to hold free, fair, and credible elections. That's our legacy. 44 years, and we're still failing to hold free, fair, and credible elections. Sad, really. In this day and age, democracy, as we know it, government of the people, for the people, by the people, was a legacy of the ancient Greeks 250 years ago. The Americans, like most other countries in the West, have realized the advantages of having a democratic system of government where everyone has got a meaningful say in the governance of the country. And they've embraced it. And it has worked very well for them. Thank you. In 1980, ZANU-PF, Robert Mugabe and his ZANU-PF colleagues came into power, and they made it abundantly clear that if the party does not win the 1980 elections, the Bush War would continue. And so they paid lip service to the call, one man, one vote. As they got nearer to power, they realized they didn't want to take any chances of the people removing them from office. The people being disappointed with their performance while in government and removing them. So the only sure way to guarantee their place, their absolute power, was to deny the people a meaningful say in the governance of the country. That's where we are. Robert Mugabe and his colleagues created this de facto one-party state. It must be said that in the 44 years of our independence, we did have many opportunities to end the ZANU-PF dictatorship. With the best of those chances coming during the GNU of 2008 to 2013. Morgan Tsvangirai and his MDC friends failed to implement even one token reform in those 5 years of the GNU. Not even one token reform. Why? Well, Mugabe bribed them with the trappings of high office, and they in return forgot all about reforms. That is the truth. That is the political reality we are dealing with here. And ever since the GNU debacle, MDC CCC leaders have participated in flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, and knowing fully well that by participating, they were giving ZANU-PF political legitimacy. They participated regardless, out of greed. I have often referred to this quotation, and I think it is at the heart of that the whole argument. This is David Coulthard admitting in his book that elections in Zimbabwe are flawed. So flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step is to withdraw. Why, as David Coulthard and his friends failed to withdraw? Simple. Greed. In this book, this is the full quotation of it. What David Coulthard is saying there is, as much as he and his friends realized that the process is flawed, they could not withdraw from the elections because they feared that if he was in MDC Ngube at the time, if they withdraw, those in MDC Tsvangirai would go ahead and participate in the elections and get all the benefits, the gravy train seats. What he was admitting really is what he could have admitted even earlier. If somebody had asked him during the GNU, why did you fail to implement even one token reform? The truth of the matter is they had not implemented any reforms because of greed. The same excuse they were now participating in these flawed elections. And so Zimbabwe has found itself holding rigged elections time and time again. 44 years, ZANU-PF has rigged elections. And 24 of those, they've done so with the connivance of the MDC leaders, Morgan Tsvangirai and company. So this has become typical Zimbabwean elections. The 2008 elections were without doubt the most violent the country has ever experienced. And this is Mnangagwa boasting about his role in those elections.
2008 patakaita ma-elections pakaposa papinda Tsvangirai ndandiri election agent ya president. Ma-results abuda tiri pa party headquarters vamutasa vanga vari secretary vedu veadministration vamutasa muripi yafona ndiri kwarusape komogwenda kwarusape seka maresults achibuda kudai vanga aiwa zvako izvo munanga gwande zvako endaenda kumusha ofisi vanga vabisa zvinhu zvavo zvose watofunga kuti zani yadini yaparara president ofona zvakamira sei kati ndomamira zvakaita takatodini kateda sei manje mama ndikati abvudzai baba nditaurira baba gadzirai politburo cabinet musarangarira zvimwe zvipi gadzirai chi cabinet asi nangoda kuti muzive kuti 2008 maresults abuda vamutasa vakatiza.
As a country we face a generational transition. Vana vesa vari kuma below 35, they are crying out for help. The country is in a mess. Arusurufaro. We know we are inheriting a mess. We know this country has been left with nothing.
I'm assuring you that starting from tomorrow, you'll see a different nation from what you have seen or read on the news about these results and everything. Where we are going ahead there, the situation will be very different. What we said to our people, they could not see with their own eyes. We are going to act as we see it fit. We are prepared to go the whole distance.
As we know, Mnangagwa blatantly rigged the 2023 elections. Even SADC, the regional body, AU, the continental body, election observers, condemned those elections as flawed and illegal. ZANU-PF, like it or not, is illegitimate. Many people have asked me, why then did SADC not deny ZANU-PF political legitimacy? They could not do that because Zimbabweans, the opposition, and there are 2 million plus, participated in those flawed elections. It is not for SADC to say those elections are flawed and you shouldn't participate. All SADC could say is these elections are flawed. But if you, Zimbabweans, are happy with participating in flawed elections, then that is your choice. You make your bed and you have to sleep on it. I think it is unbelievable that 2,500 years after the Greeks came up with democracy, all we had to do is adapt it. And we are failing to do so. In this day and age, we still cannot hold free, fair, and credible elections. It is said that in 1969, when the late Julius Nyerere heard that the Americans had landed on the moon, he remarked, no doubt with admiration, that it is interesting that they, the Americans, are going all the way to the moon. And yet we are struggling to cross the street. I think he summed up the pathetic situation in Tanzania and most African countries. The way we have failed to make any meaningful progress. In this day and age, we are still struggling to hold free, fair, and credible elections. We are still failing to define what constitutes a free and fair election. And we are paying dearly for it. Up to 50% of Zimbabweans today are living in abject poverty. Mnangagwa, for all his rhetoric, is dragging the nation deeper and deeper into the abyss. This vision 2030, the country will be an upper middle income nation. It's just a mirage. Nonsense. Why has Zimbabwe failed to progress? I think it's an interesting question. I'll attribute it to three causes. The number one cause is that the founding fathers of Zimbabwe at the time of our independence, Robert Mugabe and company, unlike the founding fathers of America, they never had an intention of allowing the ordinary Zimbabweans to have a meaningful say in the governance of the country. They had paid lip service to one man, one vote. The number two reason is that while the country had the opportunity to end the ZANU-PF dictatorship, notably after electing the MDC-CCC leaders, they in turn have paid lip service to implementing reforms. They failed to implement even one token reform when they had the golden chance to do so during the GNU. And ever since the GNU debacle, they've participated in flawed elections out of greed. The third reason is the ordinary Zimbabweans themselves. It is a pity that the people have been very slow in realizing that both ZANU-PF and MDC-CCC have sold out. There is absolutely no excuse in this day and age for anyone to be so naive that they are conned into believing that Chamisa had implemented reforms to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. That was just an idiotic lie. Why millions of Zimbabweans believed it beggars us belief. Worse still, they've learned nothing. Because right now, Chamisa is gearing to tell a similar lie to entice the people of Zimbabwe to participate in the 2028 elections and thus perpetuate the ZANU-PF dictatorship and perpetuate the nation's suffering. We are our own worst enemy. There is nothing magical about America having a history of 250 years of free, fair, and credible elections. And yet we are still failing to get off first base to hold free, fair, and credible elections in this day and age. We didn't have to reinvent democracy. We only had to adapt it and use it for our own purposes. And we're failing to do even that. That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. As for the American people, I think they really have everything going for them. Some people have been asking what will happen to America if Kamala Harris becomes president or Donald Trump becomes president. The beauty of democracy is that if you make a mistake, you are able to correct it. That is the beauty of democracy. Whoever you pick right now, you know the election was free, fair, and credible, and that is the majority of the people's choice. But 4 years down the line, if you realize that was a big mistake, you are able to correct it. In Zimbabwe, we made a big mistake in 1980, and we were stuck with the dictator for 37 years. Only managed to get him out of office through a military coup, only to extend the ZANU-PF dictatorship. And now 44 years and counting. We can't get rid of ZANU-PF because ZANU-PF keeps rigging the elections. We are stuck. How it is that we keep participating in these flawed elections to perpetuate the dictatorship beggars belief. Indeed, the opposition have now misled the people to the point where they're telling people that we don't need to implement reforms. We don't need to make sure that elections are free, fair, and credible because they've devised ways of winning rigged elections. Talk of progress. Talk of regressing. That takes the basket. We are fighting to win rigged elections. How tragic. Thank you very much for those of you who were able to join. We hope you'll be able to join us again 6 o'clock tomorrow night. 6 o'clock UK time, 8 o'clock Zimbabwean time. Have a good night.